So the floor is open. I know we had a little homework to see what touched you this week. I'm certainly open to hearing about your homework, hearing anything about your meditation tonight, anything about your response to the talk, or actually just about anything that's meaningful and real to you. So go ahead. So Mickey.
Yeah. So here's one I was thinking about. I'd really love to go out at this time of year and find spring ephemerals, flowers that just bloom this time of year. And there's a particular woodsy place that I love to go and went last week. And I came across a whole patch, several feet on each side of bloodroot. And I go, and I realized that kind of letting it touch you. I had this reaction. People say it takes your breath away.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like that, this gasp, but something that really touches me deeply. Interesting to think about it in terms of breath, because it takes my breath away, or it makes you take a deep breath, seeing that patch of bloodroot in bloom. So that's my little comment for today.
Thank you. Yeah, I think part of it is surprise makes you breathe, that sort of startle. All right, thank you. Sandra.
I gave Mark the short version when I missed the group, so I got to chat a little. There's a particular place on my regular walk, and I anticipate it as I get closer and closer. There's a little dip, and it's often wet, and the grass is really thick there and just very green. And stepping just into that dip, the 2 steps I get right there I feel like I'm being received by the earth. And it goes through me. And it's like a guaranteed touch.
Yeah, I love that. Received by the earth. It's such a touch, such intimacy. Thank you. So, Tanis.
I was just going to say that ever since my granddaughter has been born, I'm lucky because just about every time I'm with her, I'm touched at something, and I'm so grateful for that. Especially at age 80, which I just turned. And my granddaughter just turned 4. She is completely nonverbal. But has been making, to most people, bit by bit progress in connecting. And it's just amazing. I am so touched by that, and her responsiveness. Quickly, my husband and I took her to a really great playground the other day over the weekend, and just us, not my daughter too, just the 2 of us, which we sometimes do. And she was doing something very challenging. She's very good physically, and she loves to challenge herself physically. And because my daughter wasn't there, we were standing closer and right below the jungle gym and things like that, and cheering her on. I mean, we always do that, but it was really close. And we got back to the house, and my daughter was there, not having gone, but I was ready to say goodbye. And my granddaughter, I went in and she just started laughing at me and just she doesn't wave, she doesn't come to you immediately, but she just started laughing with joy. And my daughter said, who's very intuitive, said, "She's thanking you, Mom. She's thanking you."
Mm.
So I'm so lucky to be able to feel all that. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tanis. Thank you for letting us in and have a window on all of that. All right, Lynn, I think I see your hand go up.
Well, first of all, just on noticing, because of my meditation practice, I sometimes grasp the deeper and deeper noticing of the moment. And when I was bicycling home from some grocery shopping today, I saw the beautiful, grass cover crop in a field, and it just such a beautiful green right now. And then it just stopped, to actually be totally taking in at a deeper level and a longer level, just this huge wide swath of the green. And of course, right away that had me noticing everything about the blades and the wind that's out today, like moving through all these grasses and moving all that distance. And it's like a beautiful green, but then it's a lot more than that. And that's something about mindfulness practice that, is such a gift. And kind of why we show up for it, I think, in a lot of ways. And I also just wanted to appreciate you're talking about tenderness in speech today, attunement, just the way that you're taking us to almost the mechanics of the moment, like you have to change your state to get into the place where you can speak in attunement. And I think that's so important, because as soon as somebody says something to you where they're really crabby or angry, the immediate reaction is, at least for me, not anything like attunement. It's to immediately go over there, as you also very well described. So just that idea of, that comes up over and over again. It's the pause and the practice at the moment where you still have a choice. And I just thought you described it beautifully. You have to change your state, and just gentle voice. I can just think of how much someone who always speaks gently, like in a group, how much there's a safety in speaking with this person, and there's a respect that is always going on when that person shows up, in that way. So I appreciate your drawing that out and talking about it. Thank
All
you.
right, you're welcome. Yeah. I mean, part of it is my own seeking for how do you change your state in order to talk to someone? And I've just found tone is the pathway in. That as I, kind of modulate my tone, I'm shifting the place I am in my brain somehow at the same time, coming from a very different place. So I found that really, really helpful. All right. So Nick.
Yes, hey Mark. I was thinking about an experience I had this past weekend that actually tied into what you talked about with language, and it was interesting. We were in New Orleans to see my daughter who goes to school there and to go to Jazz Fest. And when I travel, I often go to AA meetings. And I went to a meeting in a very low income neighborhood. and most of the folks were in the meeting, I kind of gathered were, unemployed and probably unemployable. And there's a lot of, in these kinds of meetings, there's you can be touched by things and inspired by things that people say, and it's how they say it, like speaking from the heart is a big part of that. And there's this one guy was talking about how a lot of people get into problems with addiction and they just want to go back to their previous life, and he talked about how awful his previous life was, and it was just so authentic, it was just speaking from the heart, and it just was so inspirational. And then after that, another guy talked, and he got really angry about people using their phones in the meeting. And it's not a place where you normally find anger. And I noticed my reaction. It was easy for me not to, react because of the environment, but I noticed, what you talked about, like when, like you take on that energy, right? And it just totally took the wind out of my sails. And it, I had to like sort of reconnect with, that part of me that was being touched earlier. And then the guy who was getting really angry got up, and I saw that he had two prosthetic legs and did not look like he was in a good place. And I could have some sympathy or feeling for, whatever his plight was. But anyway, it just kind of, just made me think about what you were talking tonight, and about, being touched by, the not only, the way somebody shares their heart, but, what'd you say? The sharing their heart, but then, how they share it. And it was kind of both. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That AA is certainly a place where you could see how one person's willingness to speak from openness and authenticity just touches everybody. People resonate, with each other that way. So thank you. That's a great image. All right. Who else?
I can't figure out how to get my hand up. So
You unmuted, which kind of does the same thing. You pop to the top of my list, and I see you.
I never had a problem with it before, but anyway. Yeah. Actually, so something that touched me this week was a touch. So kind of both of your themes, and it was a self-touch. This was in Patty Townsend's yoga class last Wednesday. And for people who don't know, she's often having you like go inside to find like organs you didn't know you had.
That's a good description. Yes.
But she was having us touch right here. Okay. And this is on Zoom. So what's remarkable to me, and there's like 20 people in this class, so what's remarkable to me is that she's watching us do this on Zoom, and that she says, no, not like that. Don't press. She says, like E.T., like E.T.'s finger. And it was like, oh, E.T. And there's like like a curiosity or something? Or I instantly like was touching myself so differently, so I've been thinking about that. You should try it.
All right. I will. I will. I have such respect for Patty as a teacher and for how she discovers these things and articulates them. And yeah,
Yeah.
she's really a master.
And wear these little boxes and she can see that we're pressing, and not. So yeah, amazing.
Right. Thanks, Nancy. No one's stepping forward. I was thinking, one of the things that touched me this week was walking barefoot through the grass. So simple, but it's so different than walking across the yard with your shoes on. And feeling all the little unevenness of the ground. You think the ground looks flat, and then you walk on it in your bare feet, and your feet are picking up all these little things, and the things that's kind of buried down there somewhere in the turf. You don't even know what it is that you're stepping on, and the coolness of it. It's like I could feel the ground temperature when I walk barefoot, and that somehow matters to me, to be connected to the ground temperature. I mean, certainly in the middle of the winter, I'm not necessarily so interested in connecting with the ground temperature. But, in the spring and even in the summer, when the ground temperature can be quite warm, there's this sense of touching the earth and being touched by the earth. I've been doing a Qigong class on Tuesday mornings in Montague. It's Qigong is a Taoist practice, a Chinese Taoist practice that uses movements to kind of open up the energy lines of the body in various ways. And so, we were doing it barefoot, and she was having us out in the park, and we were kind of including a tree in our circle. Like the tree was one of the members of the group. And I had the sweetest feeling for this tree, a maple tree, not a huge one, but not a small one either, a trunk, I don't know, maybe kind of about that round. And, but there was, in mentioning that, there was this sense of presence. Yes, the tree is an actual presence in our circle. And then at the end, we circled the tree and did our final bow to the tree. Usually we bow to the west, bow to the east in the beginning of the practice, and bow to the west at the end of the practice. But this time we bowed to the tree. And, the teacher said something which kind of comes out of the Taoist worldview, which is sort of an animist worldview. It's a view that everything is spirit, everything has spirit, everything is spirit. And she said, you're regarding the tree, but the tree is regarding you too. And I took that in for a moment with my mind and thought, yeah, this tree has senses that we don't really give it credit for. It feels vibrations in the earth into its roots. It can smell us. It has an acute sense of smell. Whether it's really out sniffing human beings, I don't know, but certainly there's a sense of touch and smell that would impact the tree. So that was kind of my head speaking there for a moment. And then I just dropped down into my heart, and in a way that I don't need to articulate, there was just a sense of, yeah, this tree feels our presence. And I've often felt that with trees. Communicating with trees, not so much about words, but about presence. That you can stand with a tree and you can feel its presence. Another example of something that touched me, this tree, this tree, and the fact that the teacher included the tree in the circle, acknowledged it as a being. It's so different when you acknowledge things as beings that are around you. I feel like they respond. There's some sense, the tree goes, oh, they know I'm here. I matter, I matter to this human being. Not just because I'm providing shade, not just because I'm, somebody's source of lumber, but my being matters and I'm included. You can easily imagine human beings talking this way, but I don't feel like I have to stretch that much to have a tree sort of talk this way. Maybe I'm becoming an animist myself. If I'm not already. All right, anyone else? We have a few more minutes for another share. Yeah, Diane.
There's a wonderful book I read. I think he's a psychologist at University of Michigan, and it's about how to deal with chatter in our heads, not just the usual self-talk, but that ruminating and so forth. And he talks about a technique called distant self-talk. And there's been a lot of chatter in my head recently, and I just found it's interesting. As soon as I say my own name in my head, I'm so much more kind. It's a much more tender voice when you use your name. I don't understand the mechanism, but it is as if you're speaking to another entity, and it's so much easier to be tender than it is if I just let that chatter keep going. So I thought it's interesting how we can be a little, I shouldn't generalize, but I noticed I can be much more tender with myself when I talk to myself as from the third person perspective, I guess. I noticed that.
Thanks for that. I hadn't considered the impact of using your name. I do use my name to myself with some frequency, and I'll have to notice, but I think you're right. I think it shifts the tone. And I give myself little pep talks.
Yeah. It depends how I say my name, because there are times I'll be like, Diane,
Diane, yeah.
Right. But if I'm stepping back and essentially talking to myself as I might to another person. Anyway, it's an interesting.
So that must be what it means by distant self-talk, that you step back from yourself and talk to yourself. Beautiful. I like that. I'll notice that. All right. Anyone else? We got a couple more minutes.
I found myself in the beginning of this exercise, sort of during the week, thinking about touch and what things are touching. And it did occur to me that I live alone. And I think that there's less opportunities for being touched in some ways when you live alone. I mean, I have my cat, Teddy. But I remember when my daughter, Shula, was just a baby and a young child, I could be touched a lot, many times a day. But I did notice too, I thought about touch, we kind of associate with tenderness. But then at first I was thinking, well, what about when I'm watching the news and people are getting killed in Gaza and the Ukraine, or somebody's driving their car into them? And then I'm feeling really touched by that. But then I decided, I suppose that's related to compassion. That's what came to my mind. Maybe it isn't, but maybe that's a type of tenderness. And then it is.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I had
letting that into your heart.
Yeah. Then I had an experience. I've been reading this book, which is very particular. It's not the book for everybody. It's about a man named Henri Lassault, who was a Benedictine French monk and moved to India in his 30s and lived there for 25 years as a wandering sadhu.
Oh, what a cool book. What's the title of the book?
Well, this one is his letters. That's a picture of him in his later years.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I could loan it to you if you wanted. But anyway, I'm towards the end now, and he has a heart attack on a street, and I think it's Rishikesh. I probably am not saying totally right. And he was fortunate because somebody recognized him and he was taken to the hospital and stuff. But he lives for 5 more months. And in those months, he all of his previous 25 years seemed to be coming to a conclusion spiritually for him. And reading that, I looked out the window, and there was this whole being touched by his words and looking out the window at nature and feeling it's kind of resonating back and forth. I can't describe it exactly, but so that was my adventure with touch during the week.
Beautiful. Thank you.
But if you'd ever like to borrow the book, let me know. But it's, it's pretty specific.
Yeah, it sounds like my kind of book. I read those sort of things about, spiritual seekers and wanderers.
Mm.
All right, we're at our time, folks. So be well. Have a really good week. Continue to notice what touches you, but work with the speech, noticing tone, noticing touch, noticing tone, and noticing speaking for your heart about what matters. And you can do that also by noticing when other people are doing it around you. Okay. All right. And we'll talk next week. Be well.